Salutations to the Truth Core, whoever and wherever you may be on the planet. I'm here today with installment 6 in Gnostic Sabotage in the Book of Revelation. And the title is The Lamb with Two Horns. To begin, let's review the legend of the mad monk. Remember that the story says that 3 refugees from the mystery schools of the Near East, in what is today Syria and Lebanon and Turkey, were fleeing to the Westlands. And on their way, they traveled along the northern coast of the Mediterranean, entering Macedonia. And during that time, they heard rumors about the mad monk, and they went to the Petrolona cave to investigate. Over a period of about 3 weeks, they conversed closely with the 5 or 6 monks there, as well as with the central figure himself, Ioannis. And the female initiate, Sophronis, the tall, thin, stately woman, due to her empathy and also her psychological skills, was able to penetrate into the mind of the mad monk. She not only reached him in his psychotic visions erupting from his imagination, but at times she was also able to reach the rational mind of that man, which was still present at moments within his dementia. She talked with him about the story, and of course she didn't get the story from him because he was in a very unstable condition. Sometimes he would suffer terrible fits comparable to epileptic seizures. He would seize portions of what had been written down by the other monks and eat them. And they would take down what he said. So they were taking dictation. So he actually didn't write anything. So Sophronis and the other 2 initiates from the mysteries, the Teleste, carefully read over these fragments and discussed them with everyone that was in the cave. But the woman had a special role to play. How can you describe it in modern terms? Well, perhaps in 2 ways. In one way, you could say that she was able to enter into his imagination and prompt him as you would prompt an actor playing a role. You could also say that she suggested certain things to him by a psychological method. Today, we know that psychological method very well because it is widely used by the authorities and the enemies of life to program the masses. You do it through subliminal suggestion. You do it through, of course, lies, in the case of the situation today, but she wasn't lying. She was reaching him in his imagination and prompting him about the sequence of his visions. And on those rare moments when she had access to his rational mind, they actually had conversations, brief but sober conversations, about how the visionary scenario was developing. At the same time, the 2 other refugees, the men, were reading over the various fragmentary manuscripts that contained the transcription of his visions. And as the story says, they assisted the other monks to organize it into some kind of storyline that made sense. And this was not easy to do. But they used the device of the triangle, being great storytellers themselves, being responsible for preserving the legacy of many generations of the Magian order and retelling the story of the fallen goddess, they knew, as scriptwriters today also know, that each genuine narrative has a triangular form. It starts and builds to an apex, which is generally the middle of a movie, and then it descends to the conclusion or outcome of the movie. So they assisted the monks in setting up all of this fragmentary material in a series of chapters that reflect that structure, and that is how it comes down to us today. Following their advice, the monks began to organize a master document, and they established the apex of the story arc at chapter 13. However, when Sophrades was consulting with her associates about what they learned about the existing fragments, they brought to her attention a verse in chapter 11, specifically verse 7, and it reads like this: "And when they shall have finished their testimony, the beast that ascendeth out of the bottomless pit shall make war against them, and shall overcome them and kill them." Note that the language in this verse uses the word testimony, which is courtroom language. Well, obviously, the book of Revelation is a narrative of the Last Judgment, so it's like a courtroom trial. But it's unlike a courtroom trial in the sense that a riot breaks out in the middle of the trial. Now, once Sophrades scrutinized this passage, and they had placed it in the right sequence in the story as they were putting it together, she reflected on it closely. And in her ensuing discussions with the mad monk, she brought it up. And she raised this question to him: "Well, in your vision so far, which, recall, he himself cannot remember coherently, you said that there is a beast, Therion, that comes up out of the bottomless pit, and that there is a war that takes place. So the story you're telling is not simply about the Almighty and the company of heaven, including the Messiah and the Archangel Michael and all of the other angels sitting in judgment upon the world and reaching a conviction and passing sentence. There is also a massive conflict that occurs in the process of the trial." And she queried him about that. And she said, "Well, we don't really find anything else in what you've said that follows up that statement." Chapter 11, verse 7. And even though he could not remember that he said this, he trusted her. And so he took it as something to reflect on seriously. And she continued. And she asked him, "How are you going to portray this? What other visions can explain or describe this confrontation with the beast?" And then she asked him another question, which was the most important question of all. If the Almighty and all the powers of heaven are confronted by an adversary, do you see that as a real battle which the Almighty could lose? Or do you see it as otherwise? If you believe that the Almighty cannot be defeated by anything, that he is omnipotent above all other powers, even other supernatural powers, then what are you describing? An actual battle that can be won or lost, or a mock battle that is only presented to prove the omnipotence of the Almighty? And he was deeply troubled by this question. So she said to him, after a while, "Well, I'm sure that you believe that the Almighty cannot be defeated, but nonetheless, the story ought to show a formidable adversary. And that adversary has not yet appeared in your visions, according to what's written down in these fragmentary documents." Now, if you listen to the legend of the Mad Monk, you know what happened next. Acting in a subtle manner, Sophrades introduced to the monk a description of those satanic or supernatural powers that were raised against the Almighty. Now, you could ask the question, and it's a very valid question: do the passages, which I'm calling Gnostic sabotage, that describe the great beast, the lesser beast, and the scarlet woman who rides upon the beast, come exclusively from Sophrades? Or did the monk himself hallucinate those passages? Well, you see, it's known in schizophrenia, and he was in a state of paranoid schizophrenia, that a schizophrenic will be in a room and they will see things and hear things and see people act in a way that is specific to their dementia and actually has nothing to do with what is really happening in the room. So the schizophrenic cannot distinguish visions and hallucinations from reality. That being so, whatever she said to him came to be installed in his mind in the same way that his own visions were. But it is a fact, I insist, that she provided that material for the narrative of his visions. Scholars call that an interpolation. For instance, famous example of interpolations comes when you go back and look in ancient documents for proof of the existence of Jesus of Nazareth or Jesus Christ as a real person. And some of the documents that have been cited over and over again by historians of religion, which appear to indicate that he actually did live. In other words, the character of the New Testament, Jesus, was not a fiction, but corresponded to someone. Historically, you find that those passages of proof have been interpolated into the ancient documents. So Sophrades accomplished that sort of interpolation. And the content of the book of Revelation that she provided is the dynamite of Gnostic sabotage. The way in which the Gnostic initiates interpolated their content into the narrative can be detected quite precisely. One of the things that the two men said to assist construction of the narrative is they said, well, we use numbers. See, it didn't come out in numbered chapters. It came out in garbled fragments. So they said, look, numbers are very powerful. If you number the chapters in sequence, then people can follow this story better. And there are also references by number between the chapters. So for instance, they said, it will serve you well to put chapter 13 at the apex of the story. But in fact, the beast who opposes the Almighty is introduced in chapter 11 in the verse I just cited. So they said, let's go from chapter 11, verse 7, to chapter 13, which describes the beast, the great beast, and the lesser beast, although the scarlet woman is not described until a later chapter. Chapter 17, verse 5, the great whore of Babylon. That would be the second interpolation. But the main interpolation, the first one, occupies the totality of chapter 13 at the apex of the story arc. Do you see that? Looking closely at chapter 13, you will see that it's divided into 18 verses, more or less in two parts, 1 through 10 and 11 through 18. And again, you see that structure. The break happens more or less at the midpoint of the chapter. In verses 1 through 10, there is the description of Tomega Therion, the great beast. Now, of course, it goes without saying that that is one of the most quoted passages in the Bible. And even today, it is discussed on hundreds of thousands of sites on the internet, many of them dominated by Christians who see the book of Revelation fulfilled in the events of our time, and many others presented by scholars and theologians who meticulously analyze and decode those passages, or at least they try to do so, given the limits of their mindset and the bias of their belief systems. Here I can offer an observation which I would say is inarguable. Discussions about the great beast are extensive. But what about discussions about the lesser beast, the lamb with two horns? Well, the two verses at the end of chapter 13, referring to the number of the beast, with the dramatic assertion that none who do not have the number of the beast shall either buy or sell, or, by my translation, gather and trade. But apart from those two verses, when have you ever heard any discussion about the lesser beast? For instance, today, those people, many of them Christians, many not, who see in the book of Revelation prophecy of a regime of world domination under AI, which they identify with the beast system, the technocracy using AI to rule the world. Well, all that is well known. But have you ever seen anyone propounding that interpretation of the apocalypse who also describes the role of the lesser beast in this supposed beast system? Have you ever seen that? So, who is the lesser beast? Or what is it? And what is its role? Bear in mind that the passages that I'm going to read now are the interpolations of Zophrates. They do not come out of the dementia of the mad monk. They come out of the sanity of the Gnostic initiate. It so happens, you may conclude, upon looking at this passage, that only a Gnostic initiate could describe the role and activity of the lesser beast. And the details of this description are quite precise. Here's the passage. Verses 11 through 16. And I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb, and he spoke like a dragon. And he exerciseth all the power of the first beast before him, and causeth the earth and them who dwell on it to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. And he doeth great wonders, so that he maketh come down from heaven on the earth fire in the sight of men, and deceiveth them that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles which he had power to do in the sight of the great beast, saying to them that dwell on earth that they should make an image to the beast that had the wound by a sword and did live. And he hath power to give life to the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. And he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and enslaved, to receive a mark on their right hands or in their foreheads. Close quotation. As anyone can see, there's a considerable degree of precise description in these verses. For instance, they say that the lesser beast comes out of the land, contrasting to the great beast, which comes out of the sea. And they also say that the lesser beast has 2 horns and that it makes 2 marks, one on the right hand and one on the forehead. Well, this is all quite precise, obviously. But what is it all about? The key word that recurs in this passage is the word icon, mark. Now there is another word for mark, a different word, the mark of the beast, in the passages that conclude chapter 13. And the Greek word in those passages is charagma. But the Greek word in the preceding passages is icon. The difference between these 2 terms is highly significant. But for right now, let's just look at the word icon. What is an icon? And what is the icon of the great beast? Well, it's like an icon on a computer screen. If you have a program in your computer that edits videos, then you have access to a tool for doing just that. And if you go to your computer and you want to access that tool, access the powers and functions of that application, you click on the icon. So what is the icon? It's the way to access the power of something. So the lesser beast creates an icon for accessing the power of the great beast. And through that icon, it performs certain actions in the role of what? Well, let's say the operator or the handler of the powers of the great beast. That is the role of the lesser beast that comes out of the land and has two horns like a lamb, or resembles a lamb with two horns. Now, I invite your close attention to two Greek words, which I have used extensively over the past 15 years or more. One of those words is telestes. Now that is an anglicized pronunciation of the Greek word telestes. That word is plural in Greek today, and it means operators. The second word that I have frequently used is telestai, spelled T-E-L-E-S-T-A-I, and I have used that as the plural of telestes. Today, the word telestai translates as is performed. So although I use those two words today in my particular idiom of the living gnosis today, they are exact terms in Greek, and they mean exactly those two things. An operator, you could say a handler, and the performance, the act of performing. So the role of the lesser beast is to operate the power of the greater beast using an icon. And in doing so, the lesser beast performs certain actions. You can see in the interpolated passage the actions described explicitly. So first, it makes an icon of the great beast. Is there such a thing today in the world as an icon of the great beast? Yes, there is. Next, the lesser beast, the operator, causes the world to worship the great beast. You could as well say to revere the power of the great beast. Is there anything in the world today that calls upon people to recognize and revere the power of the great beast, understood in the Gnostic sense? What else does a handler do? Well, great wonders, and maketh fire come down from heaven upon the earth. I'm speaking carefully here, and I'm not going to make any outrageous claims, of course. I would never do that. But just for your amusement, might I point out a fact to you. When the Italian edition of Not in His Image appeared, the week that it was released in Italy, there was a lightning strike on the Vatican directly, on the Vatican dome. And that was not just a single strike, but it was a double strike that took the form of a massive V of lightning striking the dome. Make of it what you will. Continuing with the activities of the lesser beast. He hath power to give life unto the image of the beast. Now hold on there just a second. An icon, as we understand it in computer usage, or an icon as a logo, say of a corporation, the Volkswagen icon, the Nike icon, etc. Well, as we encounter those symbols today, they actually have no power in and of themselves, do they? When you see an icon on the screen of your computer that, upon clicking, takes you to an application, all the powers and functions you then apply are in the application. The icon itself is an inert reference. It has no power of its own. Well, that is apparently not the case with the icon of the great beast. The icon itself has power. It's not simply the passive switch to a system of power, but it is an operating system of power in its own right. This is almost inconceivable. How could there be anything like that? And the power that it has is living power. The handler gives life to the icon of the great beast. It's alive, it's animating like the great beast itself, the planetary animal mother, according to the Gnostic interpretation of this passage. And there's more. Not only does the icon live, but the image of the beast should both speak and cause those as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. So the icon has the power to kill. How could that be? How could anything like that be constructed and tested to prove that it can kill? Has this ever been done? Or is it being done anywhere in the world today? Finally, the last verse, 16, says that the operator of the icon that carries the power of the great beast causes a mark to appear either on the forehead or on the right hand. So there are two marks that are made some way, in some mysterious way, by the operator, the telestes. And of course, if you happen to listen to the dream of the mad monk, you will see how Sophronis, in a certain moment, when she appeared to him in a lucid dream, actually delivered those two marks to him. And what she did in that incident is something to be investigated in another talk. Also, what is the significance of the lesser beast being in some manner like a lamb and having two horns? What are the two horns of the handler of the great beast? Another question to be considered in a following talk. Enough said, and I'll be seeing you in the beauty to come.